This week's Parashat Vayeishev, opens with the story of Joseph, who at 17 years of age, Yosef ben Sheva Asrei Shana, Haya Roeh Achav Batzon, was tending the flocks with his brothers, and so his whole story unfolds. And immediately we're struck by this mention of 17 years of age, because we know what's coming up later in the book, in the beginning of Parashat Vayechi, where we're told that Jacob, when he has come down to Egypt to be with his son and with his children in that land, has lived there. Vayechi Yaakov lives in the land of Egypt for 17 years of his own right. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim sheva asrei shana. Jacob has lived in Egypt for 17 years. So while Joseph has lived in the land of Canaan, in what will be the land of Israel, the name of his father, for 17 years before spending the bulk of his life, the rest of his life, in Egypt, for Jacob the story is the mirror opposite. He has lived, with the exception of many years living with his uncle Laban, has spent the majority of his life in the land of what we called after his name, the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, Eretz Canaan, and only spent the last 17 years of his life in the land of Egypt, joining his son Yosef there. So while they both have these 17 years, for Yosef, the land, Eretz Israel, Eretz Canaan, is the aberration, right? Those 17 years, those first years are perhaps formative, but they're kind of a blip in his story. He really becomes himself and really grows and spends the majority of his life in the land of Egypt. For Yaakov, Egypt is the aberration. Right? For Yaakov, Egypt is an exile, and an exile which he recognizes as a place not of his own. His true place is the land. This is reflected in the beginning of Parashat Vayechi, when Yaakov makes Yosef and Jacob makes Joseph promise to ensure that Jacob will be buried back in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel, and rather than in Egypt, where they are currently situated at that point in the narrative, as if to say to Joseph, I know that this is your space, this land has become your own land, but this is not my space. I am a stranger here. I see this presence in Egypt as part of the, perhaps of the beginnings of the exile, or part of the covenantal promise of being away from the land, but my place is really in the land itself. And indeed, it's interesting, Joseph, who was very much, in many ways, an Egyptian, seems to hear Jacob very well, because Joseph himself, at the very tail end of the book of Genesis, says to his brothers, I know that I need to be buried here in Egypt, but I also know that one day you will be leaving. Pakod of Kod, God will remember you and remove you out of Egypt and return you to the land of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Please make sure to remember to bring my bones with you, to take me along with you, even posthumously. And Joseph here is hearing the lesson of his father. Egypt, for Joseph, may indeed have become his home, but never his true home. He's learned from his father that his true place is back in the land. The 17 years of Joseph have been reinterpreted by the 17 years of Jacob. Egypt is exile, and the land is ultimately their home. Shabbat Shalom.